I thought I'd tell you about myself a little bit and a little bit about the book, and I hope maybe engage in some dialogue with you, which is a lot of fun for me. You might have questions about, I don't know what, the book, the writing life, whatever. I was born in Mexico. If you don't know me, I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, and lived on a little dirt street in the hills called Rampa Independencia. And I spoke Spanish before I spoke English. My dad was from Sinaloa State, and my mother was from Staten Island. Yes, but back when Staten Island was full of villages. She was in the village of Richmond. And, you know, she would spend her girlhood walking in the woods and, you know, playing in the snow and playing in the creeks and stuff on Staten Island. To her, Staten Island was this fairy forest, which is interesting to me now. She was born in 1916. Her mother, she was a woodward. Her mother had an antique store here in Manhattan, Louise Woodward. And grandmother Louise had a really wonderful clientele. They sold to John Steinbeck, which is really awesome. And they sold tchotchkes and things to Albert Einstein. And they called him Al, which kind of freaks me out a little bit, you know. My mother's story is kind of interesting. And I wanted to tell you about it anyway, because this is what I'm working on right now, which I'm insanely excited about. But my mother went off to World War II with the Red Cross. And she wasn't a nurse, she was what they call donut dolly. I don't know if you know of the donut dollies. This incredible army of women who went to the war in these vehicles called clubmobiles, which were giant GMC 6x6 trucks with a kitchen in the back. And these women, unfortunately for them, under General Patton and some other fun guys, went down the highway to hell across Europe with the troops and fought in the Battle of the Bulge, liberated Buchenwald. And they were donut cooking, coffee making ladies. They weren't nurses. They weren't trained in any of that. They were, a lot of them, socialites. Part of the training was etiquette. Part of the training was, you had to have an education. These were very, you know, women of a certain high standing. And their job was to take home with them to the GIs, to give those men a taste of home in the middle of battle. They had to make 48 dozen donuts an hour under fire on the front lines.
Per truck?
Per truck. Because they'd have the whole army lined up. And they had record players, and they could play the hit parade for the troops. And you know, they were trained to bring succor and comfort to G.I. Joe. And my mother signed up. She trained in Washington, D.C., and then left from the docks here in New York and sailed across the sea and landed in Liverpool. She did dockside service, processing fresh soldiers off the boats who were scared to death going off to war, and then went into London and survived a buzz bomb attack, and then was stationed at a B-17 base in the east of England, in Glatton Hunswolds, and then they were sent to Europe. And she and her crew, there were 3 women per truck, drove across Europe, and they serviced the 101st Airborne and Patton's, you know, the 9th and the 8th and the Armed Cavalry and so forth, making coffee and donuts. They had 10-gallon coffee makers and this donut machine, and off they went. And it turns out, I didn't really know this about my mom, but she was caught during the Battle of the Bulge in the Siege of Bastogne, Belgium. And there were little things, the stuff I'm dealing with right now as a writer is I'm saddened by all of the remarkably rich stuff that circulates around us in our lives and our families, and we don't pay enough attention to those things, and then they're gone. And I told the kids this morning, I tell students this all the time, I'll tell them even more specifically tomorrow, because we were off on a tangent today, which was really fun. But, you know, I always tell people, you know, you have a grandmother, if you're lucky, or a grandfather, or an aunt, or an uncle, and they keep telling you that same damn story over and over, and you're like, oh, please, you know, in my family, there was this story about poor Uncle Will. Uncle Will, one Thanksgiving, fell asleep and his face fell into his food. And his wife, Aunt Eva, said, poor Uncle Will is so tired. And we all knew that Uncle Will had a little bottle in the chicken coop and he was drunk. And, you know, she would tell me this story over and over and over. And I'd be like, Mom, God, you know how kids are. And then she was gone. And you realize that all of a sudden you think, it was Uncle Will, wasn't it? What did they say? I didn't pay attention. And I realized too late that she was handing me this legacy of my life, my ancestry, and my story. And she didn't talk about World War II much. One of the secrets, of course, is that many of those women in that corps came home with battle fatigue, what they called it then, or shell shock, or now we call it PTSD. But you know, a female response that I've been studying very carefully, it was even different than troops. And I realized about my mother and all of her friends that they went to this place where they were completely cut free from all societal strictures. And they were warriors, and they faced horror and giddiness and complete freedom and violence and all this. Then they came home and were kind of told, that's great, could you put on the apron and cook? Could you clean the house, please? And found themselves very, very thwarted when they came home, which was my mother's case. And a lot of those women became silent, which my mom did. And they had these immense stories inside of themselves. And my mother dropped hints, and I listened because they were amazing stories. But, you know, our daughter, this is my wife over there, Cindy. Our daughter is upstairs reading comic books. You know, to her it's like, oh God, Dad's gonna talk again. You know? I'm not. I'd rather read a comic. That's what you're like when you're a kid. And I thought, what I realize now, were the cruelest words ever spoken, which is, it's just my mom. You know, it's just my mom. My mom's not hip, she's my mom. And when you start to understand what she went through, she went to Europe, she went down the highway to hell with the armored. They got to the Battle of the Bulge. I used to joke that my mother fought the Battle of the Bulge, not with a pistol, but with a glazed donut in her hand. And they served these troops by the hundreds. And they got caught in the Siege of Bastogne. Now, the Siege of Bastogne has not been written about, which is incredible for me as a writer, because I'm going to be writing about this. There's one book in a military series of military memoirs called The Bloody Bastards of Bastogne. And this guy, thank God, interviewed 560 survivors of this battle. So it's eyewitness accounts. My mother could not hear Christmas carols without crying, especially O Holy Night. She would lose her mind every year. And I thought, what is wrong with my mom? You know, why is that? The donut dollies have books about themselves, but they're all self-printed because they've been forgotten. So we bought them all. And we get one of them, open it up, and there's a photograph of my mother in it, handing out letters. And there's a chapter about my mother and her heroic exploits. And it turns out that in Christmas of 1944, she was in a bombed-out hotel in Bastogne in the coldest winter yet recorded there, under Nazi assault, Panzer tanks circling, artillery coming in. She's in the basement with some GIs in the dark, and she stood with them and sang Christmas carols till the sun came out. Wow, you know, I had to have a stranger tell me that. So anyway, she did that, and she went to Buchenwald, and General Patton ordered all the women to go witness Buchenwald. The day after they found it, they sent all the women in. And they had this hideous experience of not knowing. They thought they were going to help these prisoners, and they went with picnic baskets and stuff, all fixed up, and walked into that hell, which she never got over. And we talked a little bit about it. I have her photographs of the place. I don't know what to do with them, but they're there. And thereafter, she was involved in a hideous Jeep accident, was almost killed. She was sliced open, her leg was almost amputated, and terrible experiences. So she brought that back. Now, my dad was from a little town in Mexico called Rosario, Sinaloa. It's south of Mazatlan, and it's the template for the town that's into the beautiful north, which I call Tres Camarones, which is stupid. That's why I named it that, 3 shrimp. There's no town in the world named 3 shrimp. I just named it because it amused me. And Rosario, you have to understand, is a very magical place. It is such a weirdly magical place that when 100 Years of Solitude came out in 1967, Garcia Marquez's great magical realist epic, people in Rosario insisted that it was written about them. That town is this town. And I was a very poor kid. You know, we got born in Tijuana. My mother and father, after the war, met in San Francisco. He was a Mexican army captain, and they fell in love. And he married her in City Hall. She had left New York and gone to San Francisco. And rather than take her to a hacienda, you know, with beautiful stuff, he took her to this dirt street in Tijuana, which she never quite got over. And it estranged her from all of her family. She didn't want to see anyone because she was now suddenly in poverty and strangeness. But, you know, I never got to go very many places in life because we didn't have any money. Though my father took me to this town in 1970. And when you're kind of a poor kid, people don't notice important things, I think. For example, my dad and mom didn't notice that I was severely nearsighted. I couldn't see anything. I was kidding with some students the other day that I believed that softball was that game where a kid hit a ball and then it disappeared. And then it would reappear next to you. Boom! I said, well, you know, I didn't realize it was flying through the air. I couldn't do sports. And my uncle in this town, who was a newspaper man and owned a movie theater. If you haven't read the book yet, you'll find a tropical movie theater. That's actually my family's movie theater, which I need to talk to you about for a second. El cine Pedro Infante. Keep that in mind. But he realized I was nearsighted, and they had this big fight. He told my father, "Está ciego el niño." No, que está ciego. My dad was very macho, you know, so everything was great. Even though I was a hippie boy and he was embarrassed, I was at least macho. So if I couldn't see, that wasn't macho. And my uncle said, "This guy's blind as a bat." And they took me and got me glasses. And so just so you know, the background of this book is that this place is the first place in my life I ever actually saw. And so it was imprinted on me profoundly because I could see all the details. Trees stopped being sort of an impressionist Monet painting and had leaves. I was like, what? Leaves? So this is this town, right? Cobblestone streets, old cathedrals. It's an old silver mining town, so there are tunnels under the city still. So it was a town of 10,000 people, but not a city. And it legendarily, once in a while, a mine would collapse, and there'd be a whole row of houses or stores that would vanish and disappear. And they had this catastrophic rainy season, so the curbs were about that high, all of them, and they had little steps in them, so you'd walk up steps to get on the curb. And every June 6th, allegedly, the rainy season would start, and there'd be floods, and you'd see, "Hi, Una. That's my buddy, Una." You'd see chickens going by, or you know, a cow going down the street. They had 6-foot-long iguanas. My uncle had a mango grove, and I would go for breakfast with a stick and knock mangoes out of the tree. You can imagine this, right? A kind of a ghetto boy from San Diego living like that. I thought, this is unbelievable. And he had a movie theater. And to be a kid that got to go to movies free every night was heaven on earth. It was a tropical theater. It cost a few cents to get in. And they would make money on cold soda because they had a little torta stand, little sandwich stand, and they would put the hottest imaginable chili in the ham sandwich. And then people would buy like 15 sodas afterwards because they were dying. And there was no AC, there were just fans. And it had, like in the book you will see, it had a corrugated tin roof with fruit bats hanging. And if you'd be watching a movie and something really noisy happened, the fruit bats would drop and strafe the audience. And people in the book, you know, we would have these fans. They'd still do them in the South, a little stick, you know, and it has a piece of cardboard. And one side it's a funeral home, the other side it's a tortilla shop or whatever, it's an ad. And you fan yourself, and people, when the bats dropped, would just sit like this, heave off of them, and watch the movie. And these movies changed about every 2 days. And they were always double features, so people felt like they were getting their money's worth. But they were movies that had gone around the world, so they'd get there late, and they were beat up, and they had subtitles. So they'd all be, you know, like whatever the movie was, and then a subtitle in Chinese or German, and then some Spanish subtitles. And the double features were really weird. So it would be, you know, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and Love Story. 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Bullet. You know, these weird. And we would go watch these movies, and it was just heaven to me. But they thought I was kind of an odd kid because they didn't understand my American sense of humor. I thought things were so hilarious. The more surreal they were down there, the funnier it was. So one of the controlling elements in this novel is that it's a town. Again, if you haven't read it, it's this town in Sinaloa where all the men have come north seeking employment, and the women in town suddenly realize, wait, the guys are all gone. Where are the guys? They're not here. And narcos discover the town and start to move in and take it over. And the teenage girls see an old print of the Magnificent Seven at the movie theater and think, whoa, wait a minute. We can do that. We can go to the United States, collect 7, bring them back, fight the narcos, and the Americans won't be mad at us because we're not taking anybody. We're actually leaving, bringing people out of the United States. And they head off on this journey. That idea did not come from seeing The Magnificent Seven, I will confess, but it did come from seeing a John Wayne Western. And it's always stuck with me because it was one of the stupidest things I'd ever seen, but it still makes me laugh. And that was a movie called The War Wagon. I don't know if you remember it, 1967 Western with Kirk Douglas and John Wayne, and they were trying to get into an all-iron stagecoach full of gold. It was about how they were going to rob the gold, okay? But, like these other films, it had been around the world, and it was in a triple feature with something like, Ghidra, the 3-headed king of the monsters, the War Wagon, and then Patton, something like that. And I'm watching it. It had been translated into German, and it had Chinese subtitles. And I lost my mind. Because, John Wayne's walking around yelling, "Mach schnell, raus, den Kopf, raus!" And my family's like, "What's the matter with you? Stop laughing." But it stuck, that there was something so wonderful about this and so bizarre. So my agent calls this book Cinema Paradiso meets The Magnificent Seven for girls. That's what my movie agent calls it. But that movie inspires these young women to go on this trip to the United States. And a lot of things happen to them on the way. But that was really the genesis, seeing this town, seeing this world they're in. I was lucky enough to do a book called The Devil's Highway, a nonfiction book, which was a Pulitzer finalist, which was a surprise to me. And it's done great. It refuses to die. So next year is the 10-year anniversary of the book, and we're re-releasing it from Little Brown with new material. But part of that book was an investigation. It was the startup story of a group of immigrants who were lured into the United States by criminals and abandoned in the Arizona desert. And part of my job was to go and work with the U.S. Border Patrol to find out what their world was like, which was really hair-raising to try to penetrate their world. If you're curious, I'll talk about that later. But I had a real sense of their universe. So that went into the book. And to go back in time a little further, my very first book was about people doing relief work and missionary work in Tijuana and the Tijuana garbage dump. I was a translator for this group for many years, and with pretty intimate knowledge of the Tijuana garbage dump and the garbage pickers. So all of those worlds I thought would go into this novel. And after Devil's Highway, which was hell on earth to write, and I wrote a pair of historical novels, The Hummingbird's Daughter and Queen of America, which took me 26 years of hard struggle. I thought, I just want to be happy, So I'm going to write this book, and my one rule is writing this book, I want to laugh out loud. Every day, I will write until something makes me laugh. And I thought, if I'm happy, maybe it'll make readers happy. And it turned out to work out that way. Though people mistook the humor in it for being light, because I consciously coated, I put yummy chocolate coating over all of the hard things that I always write about. And people tasted the coating but didn't catch the hard stuff. But it's really funny, like the first year or so, it wasn't pillory. It got good reviews, but people were like, well, it's not deep like Devil's Highway, it's not deep like Hummingbird's Daughter. But it's really bizarre that it's picked up this traction. And it's one of those little jokes, I think, of life that it's probably going to be my book of record finally. The BEA has picked it. The NEA has picked it. We're going all over. I've got 8 states before Christmas. I get to go talk to people. I was in San Antonio. I talked to 5,000 kids who are being forced to read it, which was hilarious. So it's amazing to watch the little book come to life on its own, and set its own agenda. Like I said, I really want to hear from you and try to answer what you might want to talk about. But I will throw out that it looks like it might get made into a film, which is kind of neat too. Yeah.
What do the kids in San Antonio say about this? How do they relate?
Oh, it was great. Oh yeah. Kids and I are a match made in heaven. It's always great. The place that my work got a really hot response was Montclair, New Jersey. They made, I think it was Devil's Highway. Was it Devil's Highway? They made Devil's Highway the freshman read. All incoming freshmen had to read the book. And clearly some English teacher told them, you get extra credit if you write to the guy. So I started getting these emails at my website, and they were like, dude, your book really bored me, but I had to write a letter to you. I didn't like your book, but thanks for writing it. And I'd write them back and say, that's the most honest response I've ever gotten. I really don't like your book. But yeah, San Antonio was great. And I have a real blessing in that it's often minority kids who feel like they don't have anybody speaking for them. And they're so astonished, especially Latino kids,
That's why I was interested, because they're the majority down there. I was wondering if they could have personal references to what
you're doing. Oh, absolutely. They totally dig it. And I walk in, come on, they haven't met me yet, they haven't seen me yet, and all they hear is, "Ahí viene Luis Alberto Urrea from Tijuana, woo!" And I walk in and you see the applause go, they look at you, what's up with this guy? And then they forgive me, oh, he looks gringo.
You don't wear a serape when you go in?
Yeah, right. So I always greet them in Spanish, and they like that. But it's just communication, and you feel like it's an incredible blessing to talk to kids and feel like they're invisible. And all of a sudden they're like, what? Really? Wow, you come from Dirt Street? I got the whole 9 yards of craptastic boyhood to share with them. And they, it matches theirs. And then they come away thinking, maybe I should go to college. Maybe it's worth it. I always tell them I was the first one in my family to go to college. And, you can't come farther than, Dirt Street in Tijuana. I was dying of tuberculosis and all these poverty diseases, and I do this now. It's unbelievable. So it's great. Sometimes they'll test you in really funny ways. Like when we left Tijuana, we moved to a barrio in southeast San Diego. It was pretty rough back then. It's gentrified now, which is funny to me. Took the family down there for a reading. What's going on and on? These are the mean streets down here. Yeah. Crack alley. Yeah, man, A lot of dead bodies around here. Mm-hmm. And we go driving in there, and there's people jogging in nice little jogging suits, and there were Starbucks and stuff. I thought, what happened to my hood? There are people jogging. But, everybody gentrifies, I guess. But I Skyped with the junior high school from that neighborhood. And the first question, the kids were all like, hey, how you doing? I said, yeah. And I said, hey, I'm from 3935 National Avenue. Whoa! They freaked out, because first of all, they couldn't believe that. So I said, what do you want to know? Kid puts his hand up. I said, yeah. And he goes, hey, yo, you ever been beat up? I said, yes, I have. Oh, okay. They just wanted to check. I had the address down. I had gotten beat up. And then they started talking. So sometimes they'll test, and they can't really, I think they can't really believe that you're from that world. And then they can't really believe you're from this world. And you come back to talk to them. They're like, what's that all? That's really cool.
Are you speaking to people up in the barrio here?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I had my load of kids was from Queens this morning. Where are the other kids coming from?
They're from Brooklyn tomorrow, and I want to say around Flatbush Avenue, but I'm not positive.
Bushwick?
Flatbush
That's
Avenue, like deep into Brooklyn.
Yeah, I've done schools down in Chelsea and all over the place, yeah. Yeah, I do as much as possible. I just got invited to go to San Quentin. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I dress up like Johnny Cash, like tonight. But yeah, I'm gonna do that. I've had such great. It's just been great. And it's not, it's not ethnically focused, but obviously places that have Latinos want me to come. So by default, I talk to a lot of Latino kids. But I just love it. It's fantastic. Talking to the kids is just, you should have seen it today. It was so cool, wasn't it? Oh, you there? I don't remember. I was so overwhelmed with hundreds of kids, and they were so cool. But we had all kinds of people from Bangladesh and Pakistan, Latinos, everybody. Yeah.
What grade?
11th and 12th. It was so cool. And we were all yelling at each other. They all just stood in here, Oh, it's I love that. It's just it's so good.
Since a lot of kids have it as part of their curriculum, do you find out at any point how the teachers are teaching the book and what kind of essays or whatever the kids have to write? I mean, is that interesting, or do you prefer
It
not
is
know?
interesting. One thing that's really touching to me is often the teachers will have each student write me a letter. And I'll get this huge package of everybody's letters telling me what they thought or how
But
they.
this is without being supervised in any way?
Yeah,
by the
whatever they
teacher?
want to say. And it's, hey Amy, this is Amy. Yeah, it's really beautiful, and sometimes I do get their papers. I will. Do you know Jamie Ford? He wrote Hotel at the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, 127 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. He's done a little better than I have, but still, we always laugh because there's certain times of the year where you start hearing from students on your website, and they've been given term papers. So, well, I'm getting some right now. Say, Mr. Urrea, why did blah, blah, blah happen? Yeah, and at the beginning of the school year and near the end, you get all these people wanting help with their homework, which is kind of cute. But yeah, if I can, I'll read them and respond. What's weird for me is people in colleges are doing PhDs and MAs on my stuff, which I don't know what to do with. That's kind of astounding. It's kind of nice. And I've learned with PhDs, they're so smart that you just take credit for the things they discover or make up.
But do you feel that you have to refer back to your book to figure out an answer?
When they
You have
ask
to
me
go back to the
questions?
book? You have to go back to the
Oh
book?
no, I know them pretty well. All my books, so I can usually, and they're usually kind of a general, or they'll pick one specific detail, and sometimes the responses are really wonderfully off the cuff. In this book, there's a character named Atomico, who's a garbage picker and a cholo, sort of a really stylized gangbanger. And so people respond to him a lot, which amazes me. I do a lot of book club visits if I can. I'll Skype book clubs, but if I can come to your house if I'm around, I'll come and meet everybody because that's fun. And people just love that guy. And I'm always in these really lovely homes. And, it's ladies all there, and they've made me some beans and a margarita. I have beans and a margarita. And they tell me, we just love that character. He's such a wild guy. I say, if you walked in here, you wouldn't love him. It'd scare you to death. I think it's funny that wildness appeals to them. But he appeals to some young kids too. And we were in Las Cruces, and this kid put his hand up in the back, and he said, I dig Atomico. You're gonna write a book about Atomico? And I said, I could. And he said, I'm a cholo. I'm a cholo just like him, man. And he said, you understood something about us these people don't get? And I said, what? He said, we're all samurais, man. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? From gangbanger to samurai. But then you can talk to them because they don't know about film history. So I tell them, it's based on the Seven Samurai. If you watch the Seven Samurai, the character of Atomico is actually Toshiro Mifune. He's the masterless samurai, the Ronin, who's dirty and scratches his fleas and nobody wants him, but he's the hero and saves them over and over. They're like, whoa, really? So I like to hope that they'll see that film.